Good evening. Welcome to the City of Lake Forest Park City Council Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'm John Lebo and I will call the meeting to order. I think everyone has a copy of the agenda. Do I hear approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. We don't have any public comment speakers, do we? No.
No members.
Okay, so we'll move down to item number 4, director's report. So I'll look to Director Vaughn for our report.
And we will pull up the, because the dashboards build on one another every single month. As stated in the email that went out, we'll just go ahead and go over March's dashboard in order to, which covers January, February's, and March. If you have any questions, we can circle back on the others.
Okay.
So I will just give a minute. I'm gonna go over some housekeeping items on this. So it is a 2-year budget. So it goes from January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2026. And within January of the first month, when we're paying invoices, a lot of those invoices, there's some very large ones like our insurance invoice that are an annual cost. So our first quarter reports don't tend to look that desirable. And it's because we have these large annual invoices that hit in January. And so that being stated, when departments operating wise are not following suit, it's going to sound like a broken record when I say it's insurance, it's insurance, it's insurance. So just covering some of that up front. And then, thank you, Matt. So then walking down the operating departments, the Crime Watch, there were quite a few invoices that actually hit right in January, which immediately tells me they were 2024 invoices. So they're, even though they're at 73%, that budget is relatively small. So we'll probably just watch it. It's such a small item for the general fund. And if we need to carry some budget forward for that, we will.
Okay. So in context, since this is the first quarter of the biennium, if you're at a 12.5%, that's the point where you're either above or below.
Correct.
So
thank you for slowing me down.
So if you're at 13%, you're really close.
Yes, and some of it, yes. So if you're at 13%, and that might even be a little bit of a roundup, if you're at 12.8, it's going to round to 13. You really actually, as the police department, which is our largest general fund department, you are technically very close to target with an annual expense within your budget to put that into perspective. So yes. So I forgot to cover the 12.5%, and on all of the dashboards we do quote the percentage of what we would define as on target. And if you are close to that, even though it triggers a yellow for the visual, if it triggers a yellow, you're still close. Yeah. And it doesn't cause any level of concern if you're close within that. So
thank you.
Thank you for slowing me down, because I'm like, well, dashboard's up, let's go. But I forgot to cover that really important piece. So going down to dispatch again, some of the invoices that we pay are quarterly, and you're going to see that's at 25%, and that's a quarterly amount. That is not a quarterly amount.
No, because then we get 12.5.
That
we
would
pay
be,
in advance, don't we?
yes. So I will have to go back and circle back and see if we actually have 2 in there, because we might have paid March's. It might be the second quarter. It might be 2 quarters. I'll double check that. Actually, because I didn't think about that until I just saw that. And so we might have paid the second quarter because it is the NORCOM and they do invoice in a very timely manner. to be paid prior, and knowing that government does take a little while to cut those checks and make the payment. Walking down municipal court, again, that's insurance that's driving that. Municipal services, we do hold our insurance within there too. Police department, that insurance. And then walking down, we are gonna have to revise and update the report because there's nothing like finding an error at the final moment. So on the traffic safety operations, the actual dollar amounts for the year to date are accurate, but what isn't accurate is the budget. So that budget should actually be showing that we've only expended about 4.33%. Later on the agenda, we dig in pretty deeply to the traffic safety fund. So if we can pause the questions on that one, if you guys do have questions, and we'll cover in more detail with a detailed slide of revenues and expenditures on that specific one.
And will that cover the traffic safety cameras that are shown at 0% but have a bar? Will that be covered in that
Yeah.
conversation? Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, so, and then, walking, do we have any questions or? Keep moving, okay, so we're walking down to the non-operating, so, within that, the community programs. That comes in and it's not, doesn't really follow the operating, so we put it in its own thing. The elections, that's an annual cost, so even though we're at 47%, that's been paid for the year. So we would expect to see that at 50%-ish. So that's on target. Emergency management, again, that is an annual cost. The lakefront property, that's moving along and that doesn't really follow the operating. Memberships are annual expenses and then walking over to the revenue, if there aren't any, yep.
What's covered under the lakefront property for this line item?
So the lakefront property on that line item is gonna be, we're in phase 2, correct? Phase 2 of the the lakefront,
Yeah, but that's.
I think it's phase 2 through Facet.
Okay, so that's like consultants.
The Facet,
So,
yeah,
sorry, I looked at them, it's a Corey question, so
I
I
know.
why I did that.
I'm like,
You
okay.
remember, we've done the demo and we are in phase 2 of the design.
Okay.
Moving that forward, and that's actually on the CIP, let's see, Lakefront Park, yeah, phase 2,
Okay.
design.
So that's kind of, that's design dollars
Yeah.
for what, okay, thank you.
Design,
yeah, and
carrying
that's.
out the buildings,
Okay,
securing the site.
And that's actually being supported through the Strategic Opportunity Fund, which, but it's the lakefront property. That's the only item really in there. So that's, we're trying to label it as transparently as possible. The revenue, by funds. So the capital improvement fund is at 7%. And these are coming in, the general fund revenue, is at 10%. So these are gonna be, actually real estate excise tax which is why I'm bringing that up, is the capital improvement fund, the transportation capital fund, those are supported. Real estate excise tax 1 and 2 are a main revenue source. And as you're gonna see on the second page of this, they're actually coming in stronger than I would have anticipated in the first quarter of 2025. So that's actually good news. And then the general fund revenue, one of our biggest revenue source is property tax, and that you will not start to see until April and May. And so that revenue number will be different for the general fund. In addition, that is how we also received the surface water funds. So those two also lag, and you can see the surface water revenues at 3%. But that will change because of the timing.
So question.
Thanks.
Councilmember.
Appreciate it, Chair. What worries me is the access label as it were of the revenue by fund. Is that really millions?
Oh. That's a
No.
great
That
question.
would be,
That I don't, that would be,
That's a lot.
that is a good check.
I really found some revenue.
Wow.
Haven't you?
Thank you.
I mean, we're working really hard. We have grown some money trees.
Struck oil.
Oh.
Wish.
I wish.
your optimism. Yes. And it's that way through all.
So when you look at the revenue by fund, it's orange right now, but based upon where we are in the biennium, is there any cause for concern?
It's, I don't believe so. It's just the first quarter financial reports. Always are a struggle, especially in the funds that have a cash flow issue because of the property tax that delays to come in. And so it looks like you're not being supported by the expenditures, and so the expenditures will be heavier than your revenue that is supporting it on those funds, but it's because of a cash flow issue as far as the timing of when those payments are made. So it's a timing,
So in construction, we often see what we refer to as an S curve,
yes.
which are expenditures and occur slowly, but then they ramp up and then they taper off near the end. Is that
Yes.
similar to what you see in sort of gross revenues for the city?
Yes, so in specifically also in the general fund for the property tax and the surface water fund. And then like the sewer fund that we invoice every 2 months, so it's good, you're gonna have where it's, tracking higher, and then the next month it'll just be a little, that S curve will be a little tighter. It might be more of a squiggle than a couple times a year.
Okay, so it's good to hear that even though we see orange, not a concern, given where we are in the biennium.
And then, yeah, the capital funds, those are also based on revenue grants and revenues coming in. When we actually start incurring the projects, which I'm gonna not go into that conversation, and I will save that for the experts on the next phase of the conversation for the capital.
Councilmember Burton.
I think I solved my own problem. I was speaking too quickly. Those bars actually represent the budgeted amount for the biennium. And so the percents, of course, are the how much those bars should be filled up. So if you want to continue to use that graph for everyone who's watching, make a bar, for instance, for general fund revenue, a tenth as long as that orange one there, and that's basically the revenue accrued to date. So I was trying to square these numbers with these numbers, right?
The numbers are on the back side, so the true numbers of the budget, of the actual numbers, and for the next 2 years for like our general fund, the budget is about 26 million.
Right.
So, for the 2 years, so, and to date, we have brought in just over 2.5 through the end of March. So that is truly about 10%. And I will have to go back and see what Tableau is doing for the millions.
Actually, I looked at 2023, it was millions then too.
We're consistent.
Wow. How did we all not catch that? Oh, yikes. Okay, well, yes, there's some.
Okay.
We will resolve that issue in the future. I'm not gonna dwell on it.
Okay, so we're gonna skip over capital, or is there anything else that you wanted to?
I think it might be best to
Yeah,
just
skip over
save,
it.
let's just save capital for a future discussion. Here, next discussion. Then I'm just gonna go over the revenue by line items, the ones that we have decided together to kind of cherry pick out to keep a closer eye on for one reason or another, good or bad. And so business tax is coming in at 13%. Construction permits, again, a little, honestly, this is not, the first quarter of a year is not when you see those come in as strongly. And so the fact that those are at 12% is a good sign. The gas tax, that's one that as we have been walking into some changes, we've been keeping a closer eye on with hybrids, et cetera, and it is coming in a little bit lower at 10%. The mechanical and plumbing permits, again, are coming in strong at 19%. Passport revenues, shout out to municipal services for 15%. And because that is awesome. And then real estate excise tax, 1 and 2, both coming in at 14%, which if anything surprised me on this report, it was definitely that. I will just share in a very good way. And then sales tax, 14%, and the traffic safety cameras at 11.
Any questions?
The one more thing that I'm going to highlight is that on the city's next budget amendment, there is an RCW that allows a city to carry forward when projects have had a budget allocated, council has adopted a contract, and then you can carry that budget forward. I think in an effort to keep our financials as clean and try in a better best practice effort to keep it as transparent as possible, I want to give budget and finance a heads up that I'd like to true up to at like where we actually think we are going to be with those budgets through a budget amendment in order to keep it more accurate instead of carrying a budget forward if we don't think we're going to expend it because we budgeted something higher or lower on that. And so I'd like to make that adjustment on the next budget amendment. And I see some thought process.
I'm used to capital budgets being, the budget is the budget, so you close it. Unless you amend it because there's a change.
So that is, yes, and that's exactly what I'm attempting to do, but keep it super clean in our financials. In meaning the financials of the software system, which maybe we should have an offline conversation. I think we're trying to accomplish the same goal.
Okay.
So the same goal is trying to be accomplished, and I'm trying to make it clean, so I wanted to give a heads up, but if that causes concern
Let's just let's run through it.
yeah.
Let's just run through it. I may not be understanding.
We will revisit that. And so that concludes my overview.
So any other questions on the director's report for our dashboards for the first quarter of this year? With that, then let's move on to item 4B, which is our capital improvement plan. Welcome, Councilman Goldman.
Thanks. So I'm gonna start with the roundabout and the material bin covers because we have special guests at budget and finance tonight to cover those details. So whoever wants the hot seat, there's a chair right there that you can.
I can sit over here. But just a little update on the material bin project. We're about 3 weeks into construction. We had a construction window of March to June 24th on the project. And so we got a really good start with the contractor. They were, however, doing work to do an installation for a stormwater drain this week and discover potential contaminated soil. And so it's not a huge shock to me that this is occurring, but we have not determined the extent. We've taken a sample, sent it off for evaluation. We'll probably get it back the end of next week, and then establish a protocol and a cost association. Right now, it's estimated at about $100,000 to remove and remediate, but that is looking at it from the lens of maybe it's just a small piece and it could be quite a bit more. So that's update and maybe a schedule bump for the remediation. They were really going quickly and I thought they'd get done early, but not now. Not likely at this point.
Do we have any questions? Councilmember Furtoni.
Thank you. So do we know the nature of the contamination, or what the contaminant might be?
No, I would think it's probably runoff as a result of what was in the bins. And potentially oils and other things just from moving things around. We do regular collection of contaminated soils on that site that are sent to Heidelberg for burn off every week. And so whatever those things were comprised of and whatever else has been in the bin, and then historically over course of time since we've been there in operation. And that's in the soils. So, yeah.
Is there any opportunity, do we have assurance that would cover such contaminated soils through any of our insurance policies?
We'd have to check and see if WCIA covers that. We've explored that with the other cleanup here in City Hall, and a portion of that will be covered, but something to check into.
Okay,
You can check on that.
yeah, it's probably petroleum contaminated, so
I think so too. Yes. Right. Right.
with that happy news or
Roundabout.
bad news. You know, the material bins work is progressing, so that is,
Yes.
that is
Yes.
good news.
Yeah.
But finding contaminated soils around storm drains with public work facilities was not really a surprise.
So just a clarification on the document here, the forecasted schedule and date does not take into consideration this new discovery, or it does?
No.
It does not yet.
No.
Okay, just
because
check.
We just found that
this
out
just found
at the start of
three-
this week.
yeah.
So this
New.
was last week.
That's old news now.
It's like 3 days old, come on. No, thank you, thank you.
Okay,
On
roundabout.
the Roundabout.
All right, we'll go into roundabout and I have support here with Katie. So we have been adjusting our schedule forward just based upon right-of-way acquisition issues and things kind of beyond our control, because we're trying to work with several property owners there to obtain right-of-way, and we had had a bump initially with some WashDOT and Seattle City Light movement in the right-of-way. And so we continue to have somewhat cooperative, but not signed for yet right-of-way acquisition, and I'll let Katie elaborate on our position right now.
Yeah, I'll just explain a little bit more. So we had all the appraisals done back in August of 24, which you all know. And then because of this ongoing negotiation with Seattle City Light, that's been years in the making. It was finally settled in December of 24. And at that point, we were going to move forward on getting new appraisals. They backed out again. Kim scrambled and got them to settle one last final time early January. So what that means was we were positioned to begin our right-of-way acquisition process August of 24, but we ended up beginning the process January, February, and for some into March of 2025. So we're still very early in the process, and we're working hard to move it along as quickly as possible. But as Rebecca said, a lot of things are out of our control, and we simply can't make some of these things happen faster, just because we want them to. So that is pushing our schedule right now.
So based upon that, what do you see as a forecast schedule? I'm recognizing that right-of-way acquisition is always challenging.
We are hoping that May will be our advertisement month. And with that hope in mind, we are also considering moving towards the condemnation process starting next week for some holdouts.
So it's always just best to have right-of-way acquired prior to bidding, and condemnation can be a long process. So will you come back and update us and say, yes, in fact, we have to go through the condemnation process and it's going to take us 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so if we do decide this next week, we will let you know.
Okay.
And of course, and then as a result, we'll have to remove a little bit of the project from the project. And still advertise on schedule. And then after condemnation is over, come back. And complete the small portion of project associated with the condemned.
Thank you for doing that. That's a really good strategy if you can manage it. No, I mean, basically you carve out that which you can't get, which may be some small component of it. Thankfully, doesn't sound like it's a major piece that would otherwise prevent you from actually starting work. So
It
that's good.
keeps us in the good graces of TIB, keeps our funding.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm glad that was an option.
Yeah, the main thing is to keep our funding, and so this one property owner that is maybe the crux here, we are meeting with them next week. And it'll be the first time that I say the word condemnation to them. Which may just, you know, set off a red light in their mind and get them to sign instead.
Comments or questions? Well, thank you. You're good. Thank you. I appreciate the way you're managing it to try and keep us moving without pulling up the whole project for just one property owner.
Okay. Thanks. You can go home.
Great.
Okay.
Well,
I'm done.
Thank you. Unless you want to stay, it's exciting. Oh, okay.
So you're gonna cover the rest of the.
I will cover the rest, yes.
Okay.
Because we don't have to go into any detail. L90 is on target. It is a delayed target, as you know, from several years past, but WashDOT's project, L100 is on bid. It is a summer construction, and then we will go out to bid spring of 2026 for a 26 summer construction of L90. So
When do
we
you,
are closing in on 90% design on that project.
it would be good to know where WashDOT's bid comes in, so that helps us understand where the market
Yeah.
collects.
I'll have to check. I'm not sure when that closes, but
Okay.
sure we'll hear. Lakefront Park Phase 2, you'll notice everything is green. That was moving along. I spoke with Corey last week and everything's on target, schedule, budget. So they're working through that. I think Amber sends an update about every couple of weeks on that project. Material bin covers we just covered. 28th Avenue project design was completed, and then the culvert repair was completed. You'll remember that's a temporary repair. We have 5 years to go back and complete that, so that'll be next going into full design on that for a permanent solution location. 35th Avenue drainage, that is a project that's completed in February. It's all but they've gone home, so just kept Katie around just to give her a pat on the back for that one. She managed that one very well.
And it finished all within the budget.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. Chief's here, so we can say PD locker design and construction is basically complete. Just a little bit of carpet work and paint to be done, and that's this week, isn't it?
Next
Next
week, Monday, and then carpeting is on the 30th, so the week after.
Then that project will be complete.
Are your officers able to use this space or?
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
It's very, Chief is very good at putting in carpet, by the way. Temporary.
Temporary.
Not a carpenter.
EV charger design, that's obviously something to come. Rebecca will get that spooled up, allocated those dollars, and so she'll get that project going. And then grade separated crossing is moving towards that 30% design. So it says here budget is design, so get that will get reported to council. And then we will have a project that we can go after federal funds when such things exist. If that becomes a project the council wants to move forward.
So we were showing an October 24 forecast. Do you have an updated? When we might have the 30% design? I noticed that the billings are lagging.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't update that, somehow I missed that. I would make a note and find out for you. Okay.
And then the beachfront drive lift station design is.
Oh yeah, I skipped over that. So everything, all the rights of entry were acquired, all the survey work's been done. That project's on schedule as well for design.
And when you said that the material bins was covered, you meant it literally or figuratively.
Well, they will be covered and then we won't have as many issues next go around. Yeah, having uncovered materials that just drain off. It was a concern if you go back to when Donnell Dio was our project manager. This was a project she was trying to get going, then COVID hit because the storm drainage, the box is right there. So now the new system has roofing, it has ring gutters that are then tied into the drainage so that we don't have that issue.
Questions?
Just a question of the alignment of Beach Drive lift station work and the lakefront parks. I know that the sewer work includes part of the lakefront park. Are those lining up properly?
And the sewer work is anticipated to be done before we begin construction on the lakefront park.
Okay.
To get those lines in. Also the generator for the lift station will also service the main house, on the lakefront park. Emergency power, so that. So we discussed here, it's hard to use this building to house people if it's really cold or really hot because we have no HVAC. That will give us another location for a small amount of people.
Any questions, Councilmember Kirkconnell?
Thanks. And I appreciate the report. I'm wondering, is there a way to get sort of a visual timeline of these projects? Because there's a lot of them happening and a lot of them are, of course, going to affect traffic on especially Ballinger. And I'm wondering, because some have been delayed now, but some are on time. And of course, as the chair was mentioning, we have the washed out project going on as well. It'd be nice to be able to give our residents basically a heads up about when things are going to close or potentially close.
So, not having to go into a lot of detail, if you just had an Excel spreadsheet with some bars.
Katie already has those, so I'll just reach out to her and see what we can provide, maybe combine them all, give you those key dates.
Yeah, so if you have a bar that's designing the color and construction's a color, that would be very simple. And then they could be on the same line if you like. Yeah, doesn't have to be fancy to communicate that, yes, WashDOT's gonna be doing this work on the culvert and we're
That
gonna be
we're gonna
doing work
follow.
on the roundabout.
Okay.
And
Yep.
Councilmember Goldman.
Okay, not a question, staff comment. We'll find out in 10 days. But in the Senate version of the capital budget, we are allocated $1 million for the front park. Not the House version though, so that'll have to be reconciled.
And the King County Council has authorized the levy for the ballot this fall. And that does include $4 million through Councilmember Denbowski for the Lakefront Park. So even that alone would fully fund. The million would help offset if we don't get the 2.5 million that we just reapplied for through the federal government for the community center. Working every angle.
Very good, very good. Good, okay, thank you for the update.
Sure.
Look, that will bring us to continued discussion regarding the fleet vehicles.
Thank you.
You've given us an updated Public Works fleet report.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on my sheets to share. But let me get up. This will be quick. I'm going to grab some of my math from the last report and give you some updated numbers. There are 13 fleet vehicles in Public Works on 10. That is 5 heavy duty trucks, 5 medium duty, 2 administrative, and the street sweeper. I racked my brain on Friday trying to figure out where I came up with the last count I gave you. There's no reason. So just a miscount at some point in the slide. And then we have the 2 community development vehicles, the building official and planning staff. Those are something, they're aging, they're beginning to rust. They're still very operational, still have reasonable miles on them, but we will have to figure out how to replace those in the future. They're not included in this replacement strategy because they are general fund and have a lot of needs of police, we have very little use of these vehicles, so we got to figure out how to work those in, but that's an exercise that I'd like to look at for the next biennium. How we work those vehicles in. To begin their replacement. But they're completely operational at this point. We don't have any. We don't lose them because something breaks down on them. It's just getting to almost no value, and there's nothing from either PD or Public Works that could be rolled over to the department.
So one of the things that occurred probably 2 years ago was looking at our building fees, our permit fees and stuff to try and recognize the costs that we incur with that. When we did that, did we have an opportunity to include some of our asset costs in those, such as the person who takes the desk, takes up space, but they also have, in this case, an absolute true need for a vehicle for them to support the work that they're doing. And so when we contract for those services, for example, they bill, those costs get billed into the cost of the services for which they provide us, so that they're recapturing all of their both labor and asset costs for renewal. Is there an opportunity for us to also look at that? And I don't want us to, just have a huge jump up, but maybe over time we can, if we haven't already, think about how to capture those costs so that we can then.
I don't think those were included in that calculation, but we can definitely take a look at it.
These represent maybe opportunities.
Yes. Like that. Moving on, so this is the complete detail sheet. They're in order by year, and everything has been captured. Jared will go ahead and request it at the last meeting to correspond with, so the replacement year corresponds with the next sheet that you'll see of building them into the biennium for replacement. I did take out the replacement year on the 2 should replaces. We'll figure those out. Everything else lines out.
Councilmember Riddle.
I was just trying to, looking at the top one is 2024 and there's a 2025 for the Colorado superintendent that's transferring. So can you help me understand just a little bit better?
So the Silverado will be replaced at that value with a new vehicle. It was supposed to be replaced last year, but obviously we delayed during the budget process.
So just to finish on that, so 2024 should be 2025.
Yes, it is now being replaced in 2025.
So it's part of this replacement package.
Yes, and I may say 2026 by the time we actually take delivery of the new date moving forward.
Purchase
Purchase.
Yeah, purchase. Correct.
Purchase date is going.
So-
Okay.
Yes, so 2020, the top 3 are all in this biennium. 2024, the Silverado would be replaced, so that vehicle would be surplus. The F-550 would be replaced with like, and that vehicle would be surplus. And then the transfer to on-call of the superintendent's Colorado would move up, and that vehicle is replaced, and that's not shown on here because that's future purchase of the F-150 that we talked about that wasn't on the state contract.
Hybrid.
The hybrid, yeah.
So that one's not really being replaced in 25 then.
It's just being moved to 25. Well, it's being replaced. Yes, it is. So the Chevy Colorado that the on-call uses now is being replaced by the superintendent's Colorado. And the superintendent's Colorado is actually being replaced by the hybrid that's listed on the on-calls.
And the partridge in a pear tree.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry,
Is-
that's convoluted, but
Yes, that's fine.
If there's a way we could just give these like numbers, like 1 through 15, so we can see where 1 moves or 15 moves and where new cars are 16, 17, 18, just.
I could turn this to a whiteboard and I could.
You could draw arrows, or if it's like an A and a B, I don't know, it's just, I'm trying to make sure that I understand what's going on, and it's just a little troublesome for me.
I can do that for you. Basically, yeah, it's just one vehicle's moving up, the other's being replaced, but I can get you an accounting of who goes where.
I think that would help me a lot, because I'm trying really hard.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, next sheet takes you just on the 2 pieces of equipment that Rebecca had mentioned need to be replaced. We will replace those in 26. And they've got them in working orders for this summer. That's the Holland tractor slope mower, the 200,000-ish value. And then the Skag riding mower at about 15,000. Utility trailer, should have deleted the replacement year. We're gonna hold that for now. It's operational at this point, so
Okay, so the replacement year was desired to be in
in
2023,
23, but
but we're gonna
we're
put that
holding
on
that for
hold.
now.
And same thing with the John Deere mower.
Yeah, I guess I should say hold it.
It should say hold as well.
Or, let me look at the next slide and see if I'm
Um,
speaking.
Bad Boy. Bad Boy was the other big one that I had.
Okay, well, I'll have to figure out with Rebecca if she wants to replace those. They haven't done a full accounting of the condition that they're in.
Okay, so
Those
the
are appropriate dates.
John Deere is a TBD.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not anticipated in this biennium.
It is not
Okay,
just the two that are showing.
okay.
Next slide is just a repeat. We've seen this before, just hybrid versus electric.
Yep.
Recommendations have not changed.
Okay.
So we can hop into this spreadsheet. The development was updated. You'll see in 27, 28, 29, 30. There's an increase in the costs of the public works purchases, and those are listed below. We have 550, 2 3/4 tons, utility trailer, riding mower in 27, 28. Maybe you did move the utility trailer in 27, 28.
That must have been the direction from our conversation.
That's
Utility
about
trailer.
27, 28 to be determined
Yeah.
on those, but the vehicles are for sure. So in this biennium, what you're looking at across the board are the 3 patrol vehicles and the transport van. The F-150, that's the EcoBoost we're talking about, the 550 dump and the 3/4 ton, whether that's a Silverado or an F-250, it's yet to be determined. We just calculated based on what the F-250 numbers that we got from Steve over at HUD. And then in 2027 and 8 would be 3 patrol vehicles, the F-550 and 2 3/4 ton trucks. In 29, 30, 4 admin vehicles. That's in PD. And then 2 3/4 ton trucks. You'll see that the balance in PD in that year, that line is about 511,000. Got about 834,000 left in public works. But you've got looming a couple of years out. The street sweeper being replaced at $500,000. So I think we're about where we need to be. So we'll take future council actions as far as the revenue being put in here.
Questions?
No. Talking out loud.
And Chief Harden, you're good. You just want us to buy them soon.
I just want-
Absolutely correct, but I do owe you a kind of before and after picture, but I was gonna do that at the 24th.
Yeah,
Okay.
but this is scheduled for the 24th.
Okay.
The requested group of purchases.
So is the 24th for action or is there any other
It is
discussion?
correct. Well, there will be some additional discussion and information that he can provide.
Okay.
I intend to get it to you beforehand so you can look at it and it answers your questions, right?
It's not consent. We'll have a discussion for the public, answer any questions on this building or.
This is good. This is good.
It's a big win for Public Works too, that we're starting to
recognize.
address. And
They've been very frugal, let's say that.
it's. This is a challenge of a small city, I'm just gonna state it, and it's everywhere I've been, it's the same challenge. But it's trying to be fiscally responsible and very frugal, but it comes at an expense at a certain point. And there's a trade-off of doing your due diligence and replacing these vehicles and that. I know the chief looking straight at me, he's gonna send me daggers, but the police has done definitely better than we've been able to successfully do in addition to in the public works department. And I'm just grateful that we're looking at ourselves as a city for both departments now and addressing the whole need.
And we've had this discussion, I appreciate that. We've had this discussion before, and the reason I'm asking that is because at the end of this biting, we are showing a good amount for ending balance.
Mhm.
And so the purchase over the next several biennia aligns with the sort of replacement time period. And that we're not holding money. We're not holding money that we would otherwise be spending because it's being done on a schedule that reflects what the replacement time period should be. Based upon an efficient use of our resources and our assets.
Yeah, I would say there's a few exceptions. The chief's car should probably be replaced at some time in the near future. We'll work that into the future bienniums. It by no means needs to be replaced today. Or even in this biennium, and then look at how we work those two fleet vehicles in from community development. But yeah, I think we're on target to get the most used and most. What's the word I'm trying to say?
We're
Intensively used vehicles replaced. I mean, as the chief has said, for a lot of the public works guys and obviously for all the officers, you know, during the day, that's their office. They're out all day, every day, in those things. So. And then this last slide just feeds into the slide before. It just shows you where the vehicles drop in. It shows you that schedule that we put together last fall, 10.1% inflation. This does not account for tariffs. I read today, Ford is saying by June that we can start counting, seeing tariffs have effects on vehicles, but it was under $10,000. It was kind of in the $3,000 to $7,000 range was what they're talking today. Fully imported cars, they're talking $20,000. So,
Councilmember Golds.
Yes, thanks. Just brainstorming here. So this is all for purchasing new vehicles. Are there any classes of these vehicles where it would make economic sense to consider certified pre-owned vehicles?
I would say if we did that, the community development department would definitely be a place that I would look at that.
I will just interject if you don't mind, I have them researching the transport van right now, and we have to stay under the budget number, and they're researching a certified used vehicle, a 22, just so we can stay under, so we are entertaining that for the transport van, because it doesn't get as much use as the patrol cars and patrol cars.
Thank you.
Okay.
No,
That's.
And I
that's
do
it.
think, Chief, we have entertained and completed that prior on previous purchases for, I don't know what vehicles, didn't we?
We did it with the command staff, so like.
Yeah,
Current car
okay.
was a used vehicle, and the prior Impala before that, before it. And we did as well.
So, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that we actually have, it isn't just that we are looking to do that, that you have done that historically too, in addition. To try to stretch dollars.
thank you. It's a really good strategy, and there's a difference between whether or not you're buying a public works vehicle or a patrol vehicle. I would not, I'd be hesitant to purchase the certified used patrol vehicle.
Well, I don't think the Explorers that we could buy certified pre-owned would meet the specifications you need for a police vehicle.
And it costs more money to outfit the vehicle in that circumstance to get it to a patrol quality.
So if there's no more discussion on the fleet vehicles, that'll bring us down to new business, which is the first item is an overview of Fund 002. Does that have a catchy name like traffic lights or cover?
Nothing, yeah, not catchy at all, but we can come up with something.
Traffic.
Traffic, yeah, the traffic safety fund, we could make it flashier, we want it.
It's the Zoom fun.
My brain power goes down later in the day, I'm gonna own that, I'm a little better in the morning.
So you're gonna brief us on our traffic safety fund.
So just briefly walking through, this is literally a snapshot to date, like ran these numbers as of today to try to give you the most accurate, so it's not fair to compare this back to what was provided in March. That was a stop in time. This is as of today. And including an invoice from the AP batch that's coming. So just know that's how accurate, and that is why I've put 4/17/2025 on here, because as we pay people, as we have payrolls complete, as we approve accounts payable, these numbers just constantly are changing. So to date, we carried over in 2025 a beginning cash balance of $112,799. I do have the actual year to date from the fines that have come in, and then I figured you might desire some more granular breakout. So you're going to see to the right of that the January, February, March, April breakout. And remember that if we receive a check for the city in April, it is actually March's. So it goes back a month. So we receipt the money in as revenue to our to the city that we're going to show on the financials. That being said, it is what the court was able to complete in the month prior. And so I just tried to give, because we kind of are not super consistent on the exact dollar amount. So I'm trying to give you the average, the year to date, and then the monthly. I just did the math for you for the average. And then walking down to the benefits, I broke it out, court salaries and benefits. And then the supplies, there definitely we've added a supplies line item, which didn't have a budget. And the small tools and equipment is what I brought forward at a council meeting to kind of update you that because of the changes within the court, they had to completely, we had to bring in a company to relay out their footprint, which then in turn created that we had to buy all new desks, furniture for an upgrade to shrink their desks, literally, to put more people in that area. And so that is what you're looking at with the small tools and equipment, is a furniture and basically adjustment that had to be made in order to fit more bodies within that area to complete the work. The police salaries and benefits, that's walking through. There's some uniform expenses. In addition, those just tie with salaries. It kind of all lumps together. And then the traffic camera service fees, that's like the Vera Mobility. That's going to be the expenditures there. Again, that's 62, just over almost 63,000 is January, February, and March's. So that's 3 months worth. And I think we're to the point now, Chief, of I'm going to lean to you. We're kind of averaging out. And so that number is starting to be a little bit more steady. So we're paying attention to that on how it's all looking and whatnot. And then the public works salaries and benefits, we have not, that was there for a hold, but nothing has moved forward on that. In addition to the traffic calming was the intent in order with these funds to support the traffic calming efforts in the transportation capital fund, which was 302. So then walking down to the obligations of money that we have said as a city that this fund is going to pay for. We have the roundabout, which was committed about $660,000. We have 2 police vehicles, which were committed at just under 170,000. My time frame on that, I'm going to be more optimistic and say that we're probably going to look at receiving those vehicles to purchase them within the fall of 2020. I'm being optimistic. Well, I said optimistic. So time frame, it might not be till 2026, but. Okay, cause I'm getting the looks and the wows. So,
Maybe a couple of public works vehicles in that time frame, but yeah, PD is gonna be a challenge.
so, just know that we've made that obligation, but we probably. Cash flow wise, will not see the expense to that for potentially another 9 months. And then, I'm trying to keep you, very informed, the court employee, allocations, because there's gonna be some evaluation here, and I'm not. Basically, they have increased their, allocation for what they believe, the amount of time that they accurately believe that, they are supporting the traffic safety fund. And so that increase, originally, they were at 10% when we were giving a best educated estimate. When it was all starting up and running in the fall timeframe of 2024. And now, just as of 4/1, the court administrator has directed the city to look at increasing that to, phrasing it as averaging 50%, because some positions are asked to be allocated more versus others less. And so I'm just sharing that there are some changes within that, that are being requested as of the 1st of April. And that won't reflect within this because, we don't have a completed payroll. So, or we do, but it'll be effective 4/1, which wouldn't pay until the 23rd. So I said that incorrectly. And that kind of concludes my overview of that fund.
So questions, Councilmember Simon. Oh, pardon me.
No, that's totally fine. So just taking sort of the first quarter or, well, first trimester of the year and just calculating that out, it looks like we're trending a little under budget. Is that what you're calculating as well?
That is correct.
Do you have any concerns about that? Do you believe that the trend might vary through the year?
I think it would be early to state having concerns yet. I think that would be too, yeah, because if you do the math, it shows that it's just under, about $500,000 short if you just use this exact number, per year. If that being said, it feels a little too early for me, to make that call yet. Because I do think we also have some moving parts as far as, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, the prosecutor.
I would look at April, because you're at 270, almost 271,000 already, only halfway through the month. And so that obviously is a much higher amount that we had in March. So March had some difficulties with prosecution and just the sheer volume
That's right,
of work.
okay.
And so I think as we get everything laid out, I mentioned to you that we're going to be increasing prosecuting services, attorney services, that will help level things out better.
So maybe towards the end of this year, we'll have a better sense of the real trend.
I think
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Just remember that school gets out, and so we're gonna see some changes throughout the years. We don't realize until more.
Appreciate that.
Councilmember Furton.
Yeah, thanks for the report. One of the things that our stated goal is to, of course, improve traffic safety. So we really want this number to go down because that implies that more people are paying attention to the speed limits and not breaking them and stuff like that. Now, that said, for budgeting purposes, what happened between January and April is like a nightmare, right? Because basically it goes up to 336, then it drops down to 247. As the chief said, there's a rhythm to these kinds of things. When school gets out, there's probably going to be fewer of that kind of thing. But is there any sense of like, is this the normal variability we're seeing? Because presumably the traffic company has some data on these kinds of cameras, not in our city, obviously.
That's hard to say. I mean, I think we'd have to look at a red light camera to try and see what the variability is, because the school zone cameras have a lot of variability because school's out. These operate 24/7, just like the red light cameras. So I think we could compare those and see how those trend. They're different animals. I mean, state highway versus 178,
Right.
but I don't, we might be able to clean something.
Yeah,
up.
I'm just concerned about the variability, just this one.
Well, I think March was just some operational issues, honestly.
And we have no historical,
Right.
data,
Yeah.
because this is the first time that cities have begun to do 24/7. And so, and hybrid like we've done, so this is new. We have that historical data. Yeah.
So also, I'm just gonna do a snapshot back to what happened in the city and events. At the end of 2024, the court had literally the perfect storm occur. And so that being said, they worked really hard to try to reconcile everything that occurred between the bomb cyclone, the power outage. They had some system issues. So then playing catch up from all of those financials, you are still seeing that in the January, the February of the catch up. So that's another piece of the equation. I don't want to, I think I would be not to mention that those could be part of that. Is March to April looking, that would be a Julie question, a court administrator question.
Yeah, GIS.
Yeah, AOC,
That's
administrative office.
what I wasn't gonna say. I said system problem.
Well, it wasn't us.
It was
Administrative
the
office
whole
of
court,
courts, yeah.
yes.
So it's the
For-
whole system for weeks.
Councilmember Riddle.
Remember again, I like that. So looking at this, we're spending a lot of this fund on salaries and the two police vehicles. The things that the community will see is really the roundabout and then that traffic calming that we haven't really allocated any activity to. So I just want to reiterate that part of what makes this camera useful for us is that it's going to fund improvements to our community that our community members will see. So definitely keeping a pulse on how this is all fleshing out and what money is really going into investments that the community will see. I know your traffic officers are super critical, but some people just, hopefully most of our citizens don't get to meet your traffic officers. But that, I just want to keep that in our mind, that those capital improvements, I think, are something that our community will be looking for, so.
And the traffic calming transfer to 302, that's hinges on us filling that senior project manager position, which
That's right.
Rebecca is working on, with, just met with Shannon this week. They're working on redoing that job description, get that out, see, take another run at it. See if we can get that position filled, so. And that goes to Director Vaughn's point about public works salaries and benefits. There's probably a small amount there that we could charge, say Katie's time, but that senior project manager will be fully dedicated to that work. So that's when you really see it start to show.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldman.
Thanks, Sam. So I want to ask about personnel. So I believe in the near future, we're gonna be getting a report from Transfer Group about other locations in the city that might benefit from cameras.
Mhm.
We added one speed camera and we had to hire additional court personnel. We're up to 50% of court costs or personnel costs are for this. So my question is, does that put a practical cap on the number of cameras we can have? If one camera, we had to reorganize the physical office space, hire more people.
Staffing and putting people places, that's the conversation we had during the budget process. Of, does hybrid, does hoteling work? Are these full-time positions? I would say, yes, that's going to be a problem. We're already at the point, Nancy and I met with the courts. There's already justification based just on the amount of tickets that they should have yet another employee, which will fill the last desk that we just put in. So it will become an issue of staffing. Like I said, I met with the prosecuting attorney, they need to hire additional staff Just so they make sure they get all the discovery to the defense attorneys so that these things can go before the judge. So, yeah, there's an expense there. You do that going in, but like Councilmember Tommy said, if this is a perfect world, they put us out of business because they obey the law.
Yes, I mean, I suppose my concern is if we were to install the second camera somewhere. But the staffing could not handle the increase in the amount of citations, then it would be for naught that we issuing citations that we could not process.
Yeah, and you only have so long to process.
Yes.
Oh, it's a very good point. They just, as we see, they go hand in hand. So as we plan for increasing camera locations, we also need to account for staffing where they go. It's not just
and where they
hire a
transfer.
person, but they need to be able to sit somewhere. Any other questions?
Think I'm good. I sort of just, when it goes back to the fleet, I just want to note that we're looking at replacing 8 of the 15 public works personnel vehicles the next 3 bienniums, and 4 of the 9 utility vehicles in the next 3 bienniums. And so we're really biting off a huge chunk of what should have been already in a replacement cycle that got waylaid, I think, with COVID, where we were talking about this right before COVID hit, and then we had to just put on the brakes on all of those improvements and replacements. So it's a big chunk of effort and money, but it's needed. I also want to say thank you to all the folks who have been keeping these cars going, not complaining loudly, quietly, yes, but loudly, no. We knew we'd get here, and I'm glad we're finally here and finally able to address these issues that have been lagging for almost 5 years.
Thank you. With that, if we don't have any other comments or questions on the overview of our traffic safety fund 02, then let's move into our Laserfish license funding. Item.
With increases. Just a little bit of context of how we got here. Been trying to get this across the finish line for a couple of years now. The court originally tried to get a contract with Laserfish a few years ago, and we were going to piggyback off that contract. When I got here and looked at the original quote, it wasn't a very good quote for our city. It's basically just for 10 users. So I went back out, looked at some alternatives, got a few quotes for them, got a different quote from a different company for a Laserfish. Ended up being pretty good. It was about the original quote for the court was like 55,000. My quote was for 65,000, but it was for 5 years. The court's wasn't. I think it was for 1 year. So I had guaranteed price for 65 years across 5 years, and then tried to get some grant money to fund that. Didn't get the grant. Talked with the state archivist to find out why we didn't get it. It's basically came down to the number of applicants. And the other problem is we're just too good at responding to records requests. If we were worse at it, then maybe we would have gotten the grant. That's really what it came down to. So didn't get the grant money. While we were waiting on getting the grant money, the price went up again, slightly went up to 71,000. And then in January, while we were thinking about this was a done deal across 5 years, Laserfish decided to change their pricing operation in January. The company I was working with to purchase it from Canon didn't tell me about it until March. So the prices, they basically said in March that we can no longer
honor the original deal. So I got them the original budget amount that was included in last year's budget or in this year's budget for the biennium was 41,000. In year one, the new prices increased when I threw the tax in there just so I get a full picture. Year one would be a little over 36,000. Year two will have a 5% increase. I still have a 5-year contract, but every year it will be a 5% increase. So the total for this biennium would be about 53,000, which leaves a variance over budget of 11,000. So right now we can cover it, but for year two, probably have to budget.
Councilmember Rick.
That for the licenses, is that unlimited licenses or is that just an amount of licenses that would in fact cover the need in the city?
It would cover the need in the city. It includes 100 users, so that would more than cover all the employees. And we can pass it out to every department. It would go to the municipal, it would go to PD, it would go to the court. And might help out some efficiencies in the court, so maybe they can do more with less, hopefully. That's the goal anyway. Hopefully it would help out with community development. So the goal is to actually, for my department, is to actually build a document library that can be housed or accessed via our website. And then eventually we can start to look at how much we're spending on it, and we can do a fee study, and then we can actually probably increase our public records fees. So we can recoup some of the money, but it's not going to be very significant. But if you want to see the total breakdown over 5 years, the 5-year cost would be $107,000.
Questions, comments? It's, Councilmember Goldman.
Okay, go first.
No.
Thanks. I appreciate your transparency on the budget here. I think one of the main reasons we're looking to go to Laserfish is for operational efficiencies. Do we have a sense for the dollar value of how much staff time or storage space we'd be saving by going to Laserfish?
I was trying to figure that out. It's very hard to put the number to that without actually having it in place first. That's the problem. And it's hard to figure out.
Even though this is substantially more than what was originally in the budget, if it's still a net savings compared to our status quo, there's still a worth to it.
Yes, I believe there still is a worth to it. I would think it would allow us to respond even better to records requests just from our standpoint. I have nothing to respond to on the court side because I have no clue how more efficient it will be for the court, but I imagine it will be more efficient for the court. This will basically, the end goal is to basically make us paperless as much as possible. Except for certain departments.
Yeah. Any other questions? A couple things. So from this is, if we do this, do we get locked into a sort of a proprietary system so that at the end of 5 years, if we wanted to transfer to another firm, would we be stuck because our digital records are basically in a proprietary system? Or
Yes
could
and
we?
no. The documents themselves are ours.
Okay.
The way they're accessed via Laserfish. Yes, that would be. We would have to figure out some way to migrate the metadata, the way that accesses the database. But everything is saved as a PDF, so now all our documents will still be there.
Okay.
And it can be done. I mean, like, in places where whole financial systems went with a new financial system, and that company, part of this setup fee is to come in and port everything over into their system. Can create the workflows that we use, that Laserfish supports, and so you basically end up paying for that again. You migrate all your data, it's still yours.
Okay. The other part of it, is it reasonable to say that you've looked under every rock and that this is a
Yes.
reasonable and appropriate thing to do, given the circumstances?
Yes, it is. I was really hopeful that we could get the flat price for 5 years, but
Things happen.
yeah,
So in terms of an action item, I'm hearing, and I do concur that we should move forward with this, and this is just the cost of doing business. As economists would tell you, it's better that prices go up than down on a long-term basis, so we do see price increases. Sometimes we see more than we'd like, but it is the nature of what we're doing, so. With that, what would you like us to do? Is it reasonable to, I see nodding heads that we wish to do this, recognizing that this is the best that we can do right now and that it's appropriate for us to do so.
Yeah, and I think since the budget already supports it, like Matt said, we just need to do a budget amendment for 26.
Add it
We'll
to
bring that.
an amendment.
Okay, but in terms of moving forward, we don't actually need to take any action because it's already within the budget.
Correct.
It's about renewal of the license each year.
Yes, second.
But recognizing that we are in for this.
Yes.
Yes, that's what
That's
we needed
why
to hear.
we're here.
Yep.
Yes.
so we'll try and get the contract finalized, and that's the other thing.
Call them tomorrow and go. They said we can
Leave a
go, but we
voicemail
need a
tonight.
4%, not 5%.
I can try again.
So the council then would see it, it may show up on the consent agenda as a contract that's been issued.
What's the dollar amount?
What's that?
Dollar amount? 37. Oh, dude.
It'll
Actually, I
be
guess
per
the
year.
total value.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. We have to look at the total value.
Total value. Because it's a 5-year contract.
Yes.
Okay, and we should look for that,
Software contracts are hard.
okay, so in a few weeks.
It's taken 3 months just to get through one review legal,
Okay.
so. Probably not this coming agenda. but
Yeah, it's good that we're moving forward and appreciate all the work that you've done. You looked, it sounds like looked under a lot of rock to find the best value for the city. But very much appreciated. With that, though, that brings us to the end of the agenda. So if there's no other discussion, then we are adjourned at 7:18.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Matt.
I think you're right.